Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
This episode is brought to you by the Become a Super Learner Masterclass. Now, I've been telling you guys about the Masterclass for a few weeks now, so I'm actually just going to take a step back and let a good friend of mine tell you guys about his opinion on the Masterclass.
Hi, I'm Nelson Dellis, four-time USA memory champion and a huge fan of the Super Learner Masterclass. You know, when I started memory techniques years ago, I wish that I had had all the resources that are available on this course. Jonathan does a great job teaching it, and it's a fantastic course, and I highly recommend it. It'll take you just as far as I am without as much time that I had to put in. So enjoy it, get into it, and keep your memory active.
To learn more, to sign up for a free trial with no credit card required, or to redeem an exclusive discount for podcast listeners only, please visit jle.vi/learn or visit becomeasuperlearner.com. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's show. You guys, I have a special treat for you guys today, but it's a little bit of a different one. And it's different because this guest is going to claim to you that he's not superhuman. And I think if you're like me, you're probably not going to believe him when you see what he can do. His name is Daniel Harel, and he and I spoke together at a recent TEDx event here in Tel Aviv. And now I had the privilege of watching Daniel practice and rehearse some of the things he was going to do while we were in the back room with some of the other speakers. And it blew my mind. And that's because Daniel's gift is mentalism. He's a mentalist. He can read people's minds, or at least convince them that he's able to read their minds. Now, the feats that I've seen Daniel perform and which he'll perform today on the show are so astounding that I just had to record some of them so you guys can check them out and see just what is possible, what someone can do when they have this astute, almost Sherlock Holmes-like ability to observe people and pay attention to the smallest of details. Now, as Daniel will tell you, from an early age, he took an interest in mentalism and an interest in entertaining people through the ability to seemingly read their minds. Now, of course, that's not actually possible, but it really seems like it might be when you meet someone like Daniel. The thing is, his message is that people are so similar and that we spend way too much time imagining how different we are, when in fact, if you can read people as well as he does, you realize that we're all the same. We all have the same fears and anxieties, and I'll let him tell you a little bit more about that and why that's important. So I hope you enjoy the show. I think it's going to blow your mind. I hope the magic of what he's able to do and how he's able to completely shock me comes through in the audio. I think it will. It's an absolutely jaw-dropping interview, and we get to see some things that honestly I would have never thought were possible. So I think it's really going to blow your minds. It definitely blew mine. So without further ado, let me welcome my friend, Mr. Daniel Harel. So Daniel, welcome. It's such a pleasure to see you again. I haven't seen you since the TEDx event.
It's good to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I understand you've been very, very busy. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in the past, like a month already, I've been performing a lot, which is actually the regular, but I do these shows. I take part in this cast that does these shows called the Sorcerer's Night.
Okay.
In Tel Aviv, and it's like once in a week thing. It's a dinner and a show evening. So where you get to the restaurant and you have like a dinner, and during the dinner there are people walking around, mentalists and magicians walking around the tables and performing stuff at the tables. And afterwards, after the food is over, there's like the main show. which is consists of 2 shows, one after the other. And I do usually the first one, sometimes the second one. And it's been running for a year or so, but in the past few months, it just like blew out of proportion. We're sold out like a month in advance. So it's crazy.
Congratulations. That's very exciting. So for those who didn't see your amazing TED Talk that you did the same day as mine, tell us a little bit about what you do and what mentalism is, and kind of a little bit about your story.
Okay, so I'll use some parts of my talk because it really got me to fix everything in order, make everything clear. But the main idea is that mentalism is a subgenre of magic, where magic usually relates to stuff that are supernatural, like objects that are supernatural. Okay, so I'll rephrase that. Magic usually deals with objects that do supernatural stuff, where mentalism tries to do the supernatural occurrences without any objects.
Okay.
Like more of a person-to-person stuff. And the techniques are different, obviously, but in mentalism, you rely heavily on psychological techniques to achieve your desired effect, which is the apparent phenomena of telepathy.
I love it. And I told my audience in the intro, and I've been telling my friends since your talk, that you're the first so-called superhuman that I've met who immediately told me they weren't superhuman, and yet I still don't believe you. Like, I'm still pretty sure that you can read minds, you just don't want to make a big fuss about it. So I'm excited to get into that. Tell us a little bit about how you got into that.
Okay, so as I said in my TED Talk, well, I'll give you actually the inside story of how it got to that point.
Awesome. We love inside stories.
As a child, I was very skeptical to these kinds of things. Whenever I saw a magician like on TV, I would immediately think, oh, okay, so he has some invisible wires. There's a trap door. Like the assistant he cuts into 2 is actually 2 people, one on top of the other. And I would just try and get some explanation in my head so it can ease my mind and just I can forget about it. Some sort of weird logical explanation. And around the age of 14, I saw mentalists performing at the street. So there were no strings attached, and there were literally no strings attached. And there was no beautiful assistant, and there were no smoke and mirrors or anything. It was just standing there performing for the people passing by. And I got home and I couldn't stop thinking about it because I couldn't find any logical explanation to it. And I was sitting with myself, and I got to that point where I was thinking, okay, well, there are 2 options. Being the rational person I am, there are 2 options. Either this guy really has supernatural abilities, which is something you have to consider right now.
Sure.
Or that I have to learn how to do this. And I went online and I said, this was more than 12 years ago, so there was not that much online to go to. But I went online and I searched for something of that nature. I searched for that guy's name and I searched for magic and stuff like that. And I eventually ended up on an open online forum, Israeli open online forum, where beginner mentalists were talking. No, it wasn't like sharing any secrets. It was mostly like telling embarrassing stories from their first shows or stuff like that. This guy told of how he got to a show and realized only when he got there that he forgot his suitcase with everything, so he didn't have anything to perform with. Like very embarrassing first time stories. I logged onto that forum and I started like reading everything. I wasn't actively participating. I was mostly just like lurking or stuff like that. And after like 3 weeks of reading what they were posting, I realized they were planning like a first of its kind real life meeting somewhere in Tel Aviv at like this hobby playing cards place where you have like these green velvet tables and stuff. So they thought it would be fitting. And I really wanted to get in on that. And as I said on my TED Talk, I had to find a way to get in. And it was pretty obvious to me that it wouldn't just work if I asked them, oh, can I please join? My name is Daniel. This is the first time you hear about me, but I've been reading your stuff for 3 weeks.
Yeah, and you're 14 at the time.
Yeah, I'm 14 at the time. Actually, when I got there was one guy who I think was younger than me, but I'm not sure about his age. I'm pretty sure I was at least the second youngest person over there, if not.
Wow. How many people were there?
About 20 or so, 20 amateur mentalists, stuff like that. So I just decided that I'll go there. So I said, they don't know me. This is an open online forum. They don't know each other. They only have the usernames. I'll just go over there and act as if I was one of them. Hope for the best.
I love it. A little bit of chutzpah.
Yeah, just put a smile on your face and walk confident to any room and it will be okay. And that's what I did, and it worked. And that meeting, I ended up meeting one of the guys who would eventually be one of my best friends in this field, if you can call it a field, in the area of mentalism. And we stayed good friends for a very long time. And he taught me the first few things.
Amazing. So you've mentioned how it's a branch of magic, but you've also mentioned that these are really relying on psychological techniques. So I don't know if mentalists follow the same kind of code of ethics as magicians, but I do have to ask, how the hell does all this stuff work? I mean, even at a high level.
Okay, so, well, I'll give you the basic example. Okay, we'll do a few basic examples and hopefully it will give you some sort of an image of how...
Sure, although you did tell me before the interview to write something down on a piece of paper, which was my first grade teacher's last name. And you told me to surprise you in the middle. So I'm going to interrupt you answering my question. And I'm going to ask, what is my first grade teacher's last name?
Okay, so I thought it will be a little... later in the interview, but sure, we'll do it now.
Sure.
Just so everyone listening can know, you did not tell me the name though.
I didn't.
You actually went to a different part of the house here and wrote it down, so
tore
no
it
one
up.
can see. Yeah. It was with you the whole time. You didn't give it me or anything.
Still in my pocket, shredded.
Okay, you shredded. Okay,
Yeah.
so look at me and I want you to imagine the name written between us, okay?
Okay.
As if you can see the letters, like big block, large capital letters.
Okay.
Okay? And just count the letters in your mind. Just look at the first letter, the second letter, third letter, fourth letter, fifth letter. Oh, it's a long name. Okay.
Okay.
First letter, second letter, third letter, fourth letter, fifth letter, sixth letter, seventh. Okay, you see what happened there. When I said seventh letter, your eyes were following my hand as I was counting the letters. And the moment I got to the seventh letter, you went back to looking at me. You stopped following the hand, which means it's probably shorter, approximately 6 letters. Yes. Okay.
To be honest, I didn't notice that happening because it must have been very subtle, but go on.
It will probably be less impressive if you did. Can you choose one of the letters in your mind? Just choose one of the letters in your mind. Okay. And look at me and imagine the entire name written between us, but that letter you chose is now like larger than the rest, as if someone just stretched it. Okay. And are you trying to trick me right now, honestly?
No.
No, you're thinking of the same letter all the time because I'm getting 2 letters.
Well, I see the whole name,
you see
but
the whole,
the first letter is larger.
Okay, so, but you did see more letters while you were thinking of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so no, just
imagine the one.
Focus on the one letter you chose.
Okay.
Still not quite is it a J?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Just imagine we're sitting here and you're telling me the name. Don't say anything out loud. Don't move your lips. Just imagine saying the name. Okay. Just imagine that feeling of inhaling and exhaling and saying the name at the same time. Again. Is it Jordan?
What? Are you kidding me? Yeah, it is.
Okay, cool, man.
How did you? I expected you would have to guess each letter, but that's crazy.
Thanks.
That is crazy. And like Daniel said, wow, no prep. There's no way he saw the text. I mean, that's insane.
Thanks.
And especially because it's a different culture. You know, it's an American last name. That's wild. That's insanely wild. All right. How did you do that?
Well, if I'll tell you, I have to kill you, but...
Right. Wow. That's insane.
Thanks. So a few basic examples of how these stuff works. I assume that a lot of the people listening to this podcast have experimented with stuff like body language and
Definitely.
read about stuff like that. But the most basic element is mirroring, where you just subtly use the same body language as the person sitting in front of you. Okay? And the thing is that mirroring a lot of time is used to steer the conversation and steer the atmosphere in the directions you want. But the basic element actually when you're trying to read someone is copying their body language in order to realize when they shifted their mood. So just like when I asked you to think of the letters, and I showed you what you didn't see because you're not actually viewing this, you're listening, is that I was moving my hand as I was counting the letters in the name. So I was saying first letter, second letter, and I was moving my hand and I was watching Jonathan as he was looking at my hand. So the moment I saw you shifted your gaze, I knew, okay, it was shorter, and I said before. So this is like the most basic element, basic principle. And
sure, that part I get. How you went from Jay to Jordan, that's what blows my mind.
Well, that part I'm going to keep to myself.
That's crazy.
I do want people still invite me to perform.
Of course, but that's insane. I mean, and you saw it on my face, is what you're saying.
And not only on your face, but yeah. What I do is basically revolves around the idea of extracting information without people knowing they're giving off that information.
That is incredible. I'm completely blown away by that. And, I think I have enough credibility with my audience for them to believe that I was very, very consciously trying to keep my lips pressed together. I was breathing with my nose so that my mouth wouldn't move. I mean, the whole deal, I literally have no idea how you could have gotten
that. It was obviously not as easy. It was also on the spot. So.
Oh, yeah, and I was staring out the window just in case maybe my eyes would move and you would see that. I mean, I really tried to make it hard for you, and I'm blown away. Then I have to ask, because, it sounds like something not everyone can learn in a 1-hour podcast, but I do want to know, what are some of the practical applications in your life, and how have you been able to apply this skill set in your daily life, maybe to communicate better with other people or influence others?
Okay, so, these days I try not to use it as much as possible in my daily life because I found that it really mixes like the stage life with the daily life, and I didn't want that to happen. A few years ago, I gave a talk about exactly that, of how I used to date this girl, and yeah, obviously all embarrassing stories at our age are usually about women.
Yes, yes.
I used to date this girl, and for some reason on our first date, I got the impression that she wasn't that into me, and I was really into her. And after it ended and she ended it, I couldn't help but think that maybe in some way I influenced that situation, because I'm so used to seeing a situation and analyzing it on the first second, because of the live performances, that maybe for some reason I got mixed up. For some reason I thought she wasn't into me, which was maybe true, but maybe not true at the same time. And eventually I projected that vibe into the relationship. So it was after that I decided that I will turn it down a notch as much as possible when I'm not performing.
Sure. You're very perceptive of people's emotions nonetheless. I mean, it sounds like it's something you can't quite turn off because you see things that other people don't.
Yeah, but I try as much as possible not to make my deductions based on that.
Fair. That makes total sense. Well, is there one cool trick that you could teach our audience to perform? Something very, very simple, very basic, that's kind of common knowledge.
That's kind of common knowledge. Okay, so I don't know if you've seen, there's a movie called The Illusionist with Ed Norton.
Yeah, great movie.
Great movie. So they talk about a basic principle of finding in which hand of the two an object is hidden.
Yes.
Which it looks something like this. You ask someone to hold the coin and you'll turn around. And they'll put that hand with the coin to their forehead and ask you, okay, imagine that you're transmitting this image. And then you'd say, okay, I'm going to turn around now. And I want you to lower both hands into the same height. So one was on the forehead, the other one was just down by your side. So place them both on the same height. One of them hiding the coin, the other is not. And as you can see, one of them, one of my hands right now is
wider than the other.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
All the blood rushed out. So the thing is, this is a basic example without any knowledge of body language or anything like that. This is basic knowledge of how to extract information without the person in front of you knowing they're giving it off. Physically.
Brilliant.
There's another advancement to it, but it's a bit trickier, and I'll show it to you. So you can take the coin, hide it behind your back.
Sure.
And on the count of 3, I want you to place it in one hand and take both hands out. 1, 2, 3. Do it right now. Okay, in front of me. Okay, cool.
Okay, my hands are in front.
And just space them apart. Yes, okay. So you won't switch the coin. So while I was talking, I was doing this. I was looking at Jonathan. I was saying, okay, so on the count of 3, I want you to place the coin in one hand. And I mimicked the action of placing a coin because the coin was already in his hands. I mimicked the action of placing a coin in my hand, and I did it towards the left side. So I hope that without even thinking about it, he just went to that side also. I hope you placed it here. Is it here?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So you basically influenced me as to how I was going to behave.
Yeah. So that's
as opposed to trying to predict my behavior.
Yeah. So that's a more
Brilliant.
basic technique. You can try it at home if you'd like.
Brilliant. So it's a little bit of, what's the term? NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
I've read a lot of materials of NLP, mostly the source material by Richard Bandler.
Okay.
That's like the best is just to go to the source and these kinds of things. It's very hard to apply these things to the world of mentalism because these things are meant for therapy. So you usually have to like really nitpick. Out of like a 1,000-page book, you'll find one line that's really applicable to what I'm doing. But yeah, there's elements of NLP also involved.
Amazing. Daniel, share with us some of the more crazy stories or situations that you found yourself in with this skill.
Okay. Well, there's the first time I remember actually my skill being acknowledged for what it is in a way that wasn't just like people saying wow or stuff. When we were at a certain age, which is not definitely the age in which you can get an alcoholic drink in Israel, we went like a bunch of people to this bar, which is now closed, so no one is at harm or at risk now. and I was showing stuff to my friends. Yeah, this is the most politically correct, safe way I can say this.
It's fine. Most of our audience is very familiar with me and my shenanigans.
Okay.
Last week we talked about masturbation. You're totally fine.
Oh, God. So no masturbation in this story, though. So we went out to this pub, and we're obviously very excited about this entire new concept of alcohol. And we were, I was showing stuff to my friends. We were like a bunch of teenagers, boys and girls over there. And at some point, the waiter comes and she asks us what we would like to drink. And we were like at this high, and one of my friends, he turned to her and he says, wait, you have to see what this guy is doing. It's amazing. And at that time, I was practicing one thing that I still do actually till this day of using 5 different ESP shapes to guess the order in which a person is thinking of them.
Oh, yeah, I've seen you do this.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
cool.
mind-blowing.
It is. It's a fun little bit. So I showed it to her and she got super excited and she was like, okay, you have to come with me for a second. And I was just shocked because at that point, I didn't have a girlfriend, didn't have any relation. I was quite young at that point, and she was obviously way older than us, and it was really exciting. Whatever it was really exciting. Everybody like cheering, and I was like, oh shit, this is embarrassing. Stop cheering. So I walk with her, and we just walk over to the bar, and she's like, okay, what will you have? And I was like, whiskey. And she just poured a shot for her, poured a shot for me, and we both drank the shot, and that was it. But in my head for a second, this was, oh my God.
Magical key to dropping pennies.
Yeah. This was the first time that I realized, oh my God, people like this up to the point that they would actually give something in order to see it.
Wow. I mean, as I said, I still half believe you that you don't have superpowers. Let me ask this.
I don't.
But you would say that if you had superpowers. Let me ask this. In your talk, you talked a lot about how you originally started with these kind of run-of-the-mill techniques that everyone was doing, and then you innovated and you developed your own sophisticated techniques that you've become known for. Tell me a little bit about that process of learning everything in the field and then becoming enough of a master in the field to innovate by yourself. I'm really interested in that idea because that's something that I feel with my own kind of speed reading training, that I started out learning the techniques and I even say, anyone can learn this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then over the years, I've kind of tried to develop my own content, my own theories.
Cool. Well, I'll say it like this. In the past year, I've been involved a lot with the high-tech community in Israel, or with the entrepreneurship community in Israel. And I realized something very interesting that correlates with my vision of mentalism. Most people that build a startup company or decide that they're going to make their own product or whatever, it usually starts from the point of seeing what's out there on the market and deciding, this won't work for me. I need something better. I need something that relates to me in a way. And in the same way, I got to this point in mentalism because, as I said, I learned all those stuff and I was performing with those basic materials. And this is kind of it's not a sad story for me, but it's like this moment of shift in the way I looked at stuff. I was performing at this very high-end, super secret, like billionaires event somewhere up north in Israel.
Oh, wow.
It was simply like 10 people at this villa. We were at poolside. I was performing for them. Very intimate, just one-on-one stuff. And out of the 10 people, at one point, only 9 were completely with me. The 10th person was checking, he just got an SMS, a text message. So he was checking the text message and I was just about to reach the climax of the bit I was doing. And his friend was all in for me. So he was trying to help me. He said to the guy who was texting, and he said, no, you really have to see this part. I've seen this a week ago done by someone else. He's going to have this entire thing written in a prediction inside his pocket. It really came out of like this really good place of wanting your friend to focus on the show. He really appreciated me, so he didn't want his friend doing something else during the show. But for me, it was devastating because what he basically said is, this is amazing, I've seen it somewhere else. And after I finished that show, that part of the show went out of the show immediately, completely. And I decided that I couldn't do the stuff everyone else are doing. It just got me to, and even though that little bit was very combined with my personality and really had elements of my way of walking around things and doing stuff, it was still resembling other stuff enough for that guy to say, it's amazing, I've seen it somewhere else. I just had to do something new.
And how did you go about doing that? I mean, I imagine, well, first let me ask, from concept to the point where you can do it on a podcast and guess someone's first grade teacher's last name. I mean, how long does that take you to develop and how are you practicing? I mean, tell us a little bit about your process as much as you can.
It deals with a larger question, which is where does inspiration come from, which I guess most of you guys can relate to. My inspiration usually comes from visual images of stuff I want to happen on stage. I would see a movie, I would look at a painting, and I would say, okay, I want this kind of visual to happen on stage. It's either that or I would read something and feel an emotion from that piece that I read that I would like to somehow give away to my audience. And that's actually the most abstract part where you would say, okay, this is very surreal, but that's where I get the inspiration for it. Now comes the actually harder part, which is deciding what do you want to do with that. And afterwards, the technicalities of how to get it working are, well, mostly done per bit, but they're usually the easiest part, actually, to get it to work. But what you want to happen on stage is the hardest part. And I'll give you an example. About 4 years ago, this is 4 years in the making, I got nowhere going with this. 4 years ago, I had this image in my head of this huge blackboard, like the old school blackboards with the chalk on it, and this flow chart of like a tournament. And I had this image in my head and I said, oh, I want something to do with this. I want to have like this huge 2 meter by 2 meter chalkboard with the flow chart. And eventually I don't know, predict the last one, but I have no idea what I actually, so that's like the abstract, that's the image I want, but I have no idea what I actually want to happen on stage.
Okay.
So that's one example. A different example, which actually got to working, is this thing I've been doing in my show for the past few years now that relates to people's personal moment of embarrassment. Like, can you think of something embarrassing? I'm not going to guess it.
Sure, that's fine.
If you want, you can tell us.
I've got something.
Okay. So the thing is this. Usually these stuff, we don't want to talk about them, but I want to... One day something embarrassing happened to me. It wasn't such a big deal. But the thing was this. When I told my friends about it, because I found it funny, a lot of them said, oh, something similar happened to me, and so on and so on. So, and that was the point I realized, that a lot of these stuff are really common to everyone, but we don't talk about them because we feel they're so embarrassing.
Right.
And I wanted to give my audience that feeling of, it's okay, you're not alone. These stuff that you feel are so significant to you in a bad way are actually very common and happen to a lot of other people also.
Right. That's actually a really nice segue to another question I wanted to ask you, which is, I had the privilege of seeing the evolution of your talk as we worked in the workshops together and things like that. And I remember the original talk was, we're all very similar. Trust me, I've read all your minds, something along those lines. And so I wanted to ask, where are people similar? I mean, besides the embarrassing moments, and how are we all the same? And how do people sometimes forget that?
Okay, so it's not that we're all the same in this like very new age collective thing. It's not that. I'm not going to tell you that you're not a unique snowflake or something like that. But here's the thing. We are very similar. We're all humans. We are very similar, and we tend to forget it. Now, one of the earliest forms of mentalism is a technique called cold reading, which I actually lecture about because it's mostly used today by charlatans who do mediumship and tarot reading and stuff like that. And again, for those of you who like these kinds of stuff, I'm not saying that everybody are charlatans, but I've never met one who wasn't. But I am willing, if you know someone and you think they're legit, I'm very much willing to meet them and see for myself. But here's the thing. The technique which I do those lectures and expose on relies mostly on using verbal manipulations in order to give the person hearing those readings the impression that you can actually know secret information about them without actually knowing everything. It's basically, for those of you who do cybersecurity, it's basically a phishing scam. It's basically just looking for those cues as you're saying, sort of like metaphors and stuff like that. And there are guides that teach how to do it. And the basic elements is that the most basic element is there are three things that all people care about. And that's how you should lead off with your reading, because it's based on the premise that whoever comes to that reading wants to know, and he has something that's been sitting on his mind for some time. So the basic three elements are love, money, and health issues. Okay, so these are things that we tend to feel that are, this is something that's very close to me, and it's so personal. But the fact is that 1 out of every 3 people will be obsessing over the same subject just like you.
Right.
So that's like the basic of cold reading. You want to impress someone, just tell them, I'm hearing this voice from the other side. It's your late great grandmother, and she's telling me to tell you, don't worry about the money. That's something
that always works.
Always works. Everyone can relate to it. But the moment it gets more and more deep, and you get into more and more specific stuff, it seems more real and more, this is completely about me. And the thing is that, and that's something a mathematician, a friend of mine, once told me, you don't need to think how these statements relate to me. You need to think, how do they relate to everyone else?
Right.
And that's how I got around to doing that, to thinking about that bit with the embarrassing situations, because there's this concept called the spiral of silence, where you think that there is one main idea that everyone agree upon, and you don't agree with it, but because you think that everyone agree about it, so you don't talk about it, because you don't want to feel embarrassed, you don't want people to think that you're weird or whatever. So again and again, you don't talk about it. And the thing is, it's called the spiral of silence, because the more people don't talk about it, the more everybody think that subject is closed and there's nothing to talk about, because everybody are probably thinking the same thing. And that's exactly the same thing with the embarrassing situations and with a lot of stuff in life. We don't share these things, so we're certain that we're the only ones that feel those things. And it really made me feel sad in a way, because you feel so alone when you have some problem and you think no one can relate to that problem. But you don't really actually try to talk with anyone about that problem.
Wow.
Yours. and because you think, oh, no one will be able to relate because no one ever told me that they had that problem. So you can see the vicious magical circle here.
Yeah, I think that's a really big takeaway that, coming from someone who has brought out so many people's different embarrassing moments, fears, anxieties, first grade teachers.
It's very important to say that I don't do anything in my shows with someone who don't want to do it.
Of course.
Obviously, if you don't want to.
Of course. But I think the point there is super interesting that, you're not unique in your needs and your fears and your anxieties and your priorities, because so many people are so similar. And I think we forget that a lot.
Yeah.
We forget that a lot. Daniel, what are you working on now? This episode will come out a couple months from now, so you can kind of give us a peek into what you're working on. You said a big project, so I'm hoping you can tell us about it.
Okay, so I'm actually working on two new projects right now. One of them I'll be able to tell you more. One of them I'll be able to tell you less because it's wrapped up in like confidentiality agreements and stuff like that. But the first thing is the live shows, which are done at every Sunday at Cafe Yafo in Shuka Pishpeshim. That's a sorcerer's night. That's in the flea market in Jaffa. It's completely in English. It's aimed for tourists, actually.
Okay.
And I'm working on this new show for that venue. The second thing is I can only say right now that we're going to start shooting it in about a month, and I can't even tell you in what medium and channel you're going to get it on, but it's going to be really cool, and it's going to be something completely new that's never been done before in the field of mentalism, because it's going to be completely interactive through the screen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what language it's going to be in?
Unfortunately, it's going to be in Hebrew because my main fan base is here in Israel. So not unfortunately, but unfortunately for the English-speaking
Fair enough.
crowd.
I still maintain, and I told you this when I met you, you have to write a book. Whether it's a book sharing the techniques, I don't know if you want to do that, maybe at the end of your career, but even a book just sharing stories and kind of some of this journey that you've been on.
I'll keep that in mind. I'm getting used to the idea.
I always like to say writing a book it's like a labor of love, but it's not because it's kind of like giving birth. It hurts really, really bad, but you're super happy once it's done. Let me ask this, Daniel. If someone wants to get into mentalism and they don't want to go through the process you went through of doing this clandestine operation to spy on people, how would you recommend they go about doing it?
The most basic, and everybody are always saying, what's the non-conformist way? The basic conformist way is this. Start by doing magic tricks as basic as possible, like reading magic books, stuff with cards and stuff like that. I also said that I, at some point, did those kinds of things. And after about 2 to 3 years that you'll be performing and not practicing at home in front of the mirror, performing for actual people, after about 2 or 3 years, you'll get this insight into how people are thinking. For example, you would start to realize that once you spread the cards in a certain way and your voice is pitched in just the right tone and you say, think of a card, a lot of people will either think of the Ace of Spades or Queen of Hearts. Okay, so write to us if that's what you had in mind.
I was definitely thinking of the Ace of Spades.
Okay.
Send a tweet to Daniel and to I, and we'll put in the show notes his Twitter, although maybe you want to give your Twitter handle.
I don't even remember I'm
we'll
not
put
that
it in the
active
show
on
notes.
Twitter, but we'll put in the show
notes. But yeah,
notes.
tweet to us if you were thinking of the Ace of Spades. That'd be an interesting experiment.
Or Queen of Hearts. Males is usually the Ace of Spades, and
That's
females
so
are usually the Queen of Hearts. And after you do that, these kinds of stuff for long enough, you'll start to realize these kinds of weird cognitive biases that people react to, and or that people use, and that's the time that you're mentally ready to make that leap into mentalism.
I love that. That's a great starting point for people to play with. You mentioned cognitive biases, which made me think of Dan Ariely. Are there any books on the subject you'd recommend, or any books that have inspired you in general?
I really love all of Dan Ariely's stuff. Malcolm Gladwell's books really inspired me also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mostly Outliers, which got me to start performing as much as possible and stop practicing in front of the mirror.
Right, the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah, the 10,000 hour rule, exactly. And that's mostly it. Yeah, Dan Ariely is very, very good.
That's a good list. Daniel, if people want to take away one point or idea, or I should say, if they take away only one main point or idea from this discussion, what would you like it to be?
I really like people taking away the concept of us not being so different from each other and not so alone. There's a part in my show, the part that deals with the embarrassing situations, where I ask people to play this game with their hands, and it's built that way so they won't succeed. And that's the starting point where I look at them and I say, okay, here's the thing. When you did not succeed, you were looking at your hands and you were thinking, oh, shit, this is so embarrassing. And you felt alone and you didn't feel comfortable. And then after like this millisecond, you looked around and you saw that everyone were not succeeding. And suddenly it became hilarious. That's like one of those moments in the show where everybody just burst out laughing. And you realize that once you understand that everybody experiences the same things, it stops being frightening and intimidating and it starts to be funny. And that's what I like people to take from this talk.
That's a wonderful message. And I think we're going to title the blog post something along those lines. Daniel, if someone wants to engage with you, see your shows, or learn more about what you do, where should we send them?
Well, first of all, you can contact me on Facebook, and also you can go to my website, which is www.danielharel.co.il, and it's also, there's like this section in English, and I post upcoming shows, information about upcoming shows and videos from shows and stuff like that, and you can contact me through the website also.
Awesome, and we will put links to all that stuff in the blog post in case you guys don't get the spelling right. Daniel, it has been such a pleasure to see you again. As always, to have my mind read by you. And thanks for making the time. I do hope we keep in touch.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really, really enjoyed it and learned a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody or you are somebody or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.